So let's kind of transition to another question, so what we hope from this video conversation is that we encourage other Christians to reach out to their Muslim neighbors in a variety of ways. But let's kind of start with ourselves and talk a little bit about what kind of engagement are you having with Muslims now? How are you personally relating with Muslims and the Muslim community? And if I could just make a comment at the beginning here, one example here in Boston that's a beautiful thing really that's happened over the last year or so, really the last couple of years, has been emerging with one of the larger mosques not far from this location. Christians and Muslims have come together to reach out to Iraqi refugees, particularly Iraqi refugees that have resettled in the Boston area, but others as well. And even today, we're having a food distribution. Christians and Muslims will go together to distribute food to these Iraqi refugees. Both of us have motivation to do so, coming out of our faith and out of our desire to express that. And I found it a wonderful way of serving together, and in the context of serving together, getting to know one another on a much deeper level, even beyond conversation. And so this is an example even today of something that's happening that will be involved after this video shoot. But let me go to you guys. Maybe this time, maybe let's start with Nathan. Nathan, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure, yes, happy to. So as you said, I wear a couple of different hats, and so I work with Peace Catalyst International as a program coordinator and consultant, but I also work as a collegiate minister in the setting of Virginia Commonwealth University. And I work with Virginia Baptists, which is an association of Virginia Baptists there in the state. And so VCU is an extremely diverse, large public university set within a city, about 32,000 students and approximately 120 nationalities represented. Lots of Muslim students, both American-born and foreign-born, in the VCU setting and environment. So coming out of my beginning and initial relationships in Clemson, which actually took place in the context of a Quran study I was invited into by my Muslim friends there in Clemson, I felt very inspired to have to sort of initiate a text-centered interfaith dialogue. There's lots of different kinds of interfaith dialogues that we can participate in, but this one would be between Christian and Muslim students in the VCU setting, and it's typically been a small group of about 6 to 8 of us, and this was initiated in late 2009, and it's had some fits and spurts, some highs and lows. So that's been one thing. What we typically do in our form of it, we call it a Holy Books conversation to be respectful of the vantage point of both of us. And what we typically do is we bring our Bibles and our Quran, and we usually, if it's a bring your own text night, a student can share a particular verse from their text, and of course through their faith and their tradition, and we can have a conversation about, learn to talk about the other's text, learn to respectfully listen to it and attempt at least to understand it. Sometimes this has also taken the form of handling certain topics as well. So, for instance, we actually studied the narrative of Joseph from both the Quran and the Bible, and so it's had some interesting effects, which we can talk about another time. But because of the interface with the university, there's a global education office at VCU, and because we've become known through the Baptist Collegiate Ministry as being hospitable to Muslims, we had this great occasion recently, summer of 2011, to host in our center, our student center, an Iraqi exchange program. And so the Global Education Office, in connection with our center, hosted an intercultural dialogue for Iraqi exchange students, and most of these Iraqis happen to be from the Kurdish area of Iraq. So that was a very rich time. As well, one of the things that's happened from out of these dialogues that has been very unsuspecting, and maybe brothers around the table would say these are these wonderful surprises, but you think you're obviously just in the middle of a dialogue, but what has come out of it is really friendship. And Paul Gordon Chandler, who's an Episcopal priest in Cairo, has written on Christian-Muslim relations. He likes to say he's all for interfaith dialogue, but what he's really for is interfaith friendship. And there's some reasons for that, and we're experiencing those in our setting, Greg. And what we've seen come out of this friendship is we have Baptist students serving alongside Muslim students in a downtown, homeless lunch ministry. We have actually hosted common meals where Baptist students and Muslim students come together, and we've invited a Christian professor upon one occasion, a Nigerian, to talk about Christian-Muslim relations, but we do it around food and that sort of interaction, and it's sort of a casual intentionality. So there's some other ways that I'm interacting in the city of Richmond. I have some really good friendships, relationships with the Imam of the Islamic Center of Virginia, and also the director of the Virginia Muslim Coalition for Public Affairs, who advises the MSA at VCU. And so we have ongoing friendships where we get together and try to understand all of this in relationship to our city and our region. We've also had Muslims in our home for dinner, students and other Muslims, and that's been a wonderful way of interacting as well, of course, and more intimate and personal. Yeah.
It's interesting, you mentioned about the Holy Books study, and I'm sure that might raise some questions in some people's minds about doing, Christians and Muslims studying each other's holy books and stuff like that. And I think the questions of, would many Christians be comfortable doing that, and kind of addressing that question. And I think we want to get at that. We want to get at what maybe some Christians might react to that, and there may be some resistance to that. I don't want to go there right now, but I just want to acknowledge that's probably there, and we will go there to kind of explore that more deeply. But let me turn to Dave now. Dave, maybe you could share some things that engagement way that you've been involved, or that you've seen Christians involved.
Sure. Maybe I'll just begin by saying that I lived for about 15 years in the Middle East. I love Middle Eastern culture. I love the Arabic language, and of course I love Middle Eastern food. And so all of these things provide me with a motivation and desire to want to get to know particularly people from the Middle East, but not just Middle Easterners, but Muslims in general. So I spend a fair amount of time with Muslims because I love Muslims, I love the culture, I love the language. And so on a number of different levels, I have involvement with Muslims as friends. I have several Muslim friends, both here and abroad. I continue to keep in touch with Muslim friends. I lived in Egypt for a number of years and in Jordan. I had the opportunity to travel to both of those countries earlier this year or last year. And so I continue to have those relationships. And here, I think it would be safe to say that hardly a day goes by that I don't have some contact with Muslims. Of course, I already mentioned I love the Arabic language. So if I hear somebody speaking Arabic, I want to join in the conversation. Part of that is I just want to keep up with my Arabic. But I love the language. And so the other day, I had an opportunity to have lunch with some Muslim friends over in Lynn, where I live. I brought my wife and my mother, and we had a wonderful time there eating some Iraqi food. So that's on one level, that's kind of a personal level that I have these relationships with Muslim friends. On kind of a more ministerial level, I also relate to some leaders, Muslim leaders. One of the ways that I do that is I try to introduce Christians to the Muslim community. And one of the ways that I do that is to bring them to the mosque, because I find that that's a good way to introduce Christians to Muslims. It gives Christians to see the opportunity that Muslims can be very hospitable. When we come into the mosque, they greet us warmly, they help us, and they show us hospitality. So I think that's a great way to have relationships between Christians and Muslims by introducing Christians to Muslims and Muslims to Christians as well. So these are on a couple of levels. Another way that I interact with Muslims is through Bible studies. I love to study the Bible with Muslims. And somebody might say, well, why do you want to do that? Are you trying to convert them? Well, no, not necessarily. I just find it interesting because of the perspective that Muslims bring to the scriptures. And so I just enjoy studying the Bible with Muslims. So those are a few different ways that I'm involved with Muslims in my personal life and also on a ministry level.